The sound of the front door clicking shut behind me was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. It was a final, metallic sound. A lock turning, not just on a door, but on a life I thought was mine. My son, my Leo, stood on the other side. His face, which I had memorized from the moment they first placed him in my arms, was a mask of cold frustration. "Just for a little while, Mom," he'd said, his voice tight. "We just need some space, Chloe and I. We need our own life." I stood on the porch of the house I'd helped him buy, a small, worn suitcase in my hand. It contained a few changes of clothes, my toiletries, and the old photo album I couldn't bear to leave behind. My coat felt thin against the sharp evening wind. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Not then. The shock was a thick wool blanket, muffling everything. I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. I saw Chloe's shadow move away from the window, and I knew this wasn't just for a little while. I walked down the perfectly paved driveway, each step an effort. I remembered when this was just dirt and dreams. Leo had been so excited, showing me the blueprints. "A room for you right here, Mom, with a view of the garden." The garden was now Chloe's, filled with plants I didn't recognize and sharp-edged sculptures. My room had slowly filled with things that weren't mine: exercise equipment, boxes of their seasonal decorations. I had become a guest in my own life. The argument had been about something so small, a chipped teacup. It was my late husband, Arthur's favorite. It was old and faded, with a little blue bird painted on the side. I was washing it by hand, like I always did, when Chloe came in. "Elara, honestly," she said, her voice laced with that weary tone she reserved just for me. "We have a dishwasher for a reason. And that thing is an eyesore. It doesn't match anything." "It was Arthur's," I said softly. "I know, but Arthur's been gone for 10 years. The house needs to look put together, not like a thrift store." Leo walked in then, catching the tail end of it. He saw the tension on his wife's face and the hurt on mine. "And he always chose her, Mom. Chloe's right," he said, avoiding my eyes. "It's just a cup. We're trying to build something here, a modern home." And from that tiny crack, everything crumbled. The next 2 hours were a blur of hushed, angry whispers between them, and then the final conversation. "We need our space." My feet carried me to the bus stop. The bus ride was a haze of streetlights, smearing across the window. I got off downtown and found a small, cheap motel called the Starlight Inn. The neon sign flickered, one of the stars dark and dead. The room smelled of stale smoke and bleach. I sat on the edge of the lumpy bed, the suitcase still in my hand, and that's when I finally cried. It wasn't a loud, wailing cry. It was a silent, gut-wrenching sob that shook my whole body. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the collar of my coat. I cried for my son, the little boy who used to run to me with scraped knees, his face buried in my lap, trusting me to make it all better. I cried for my husband, Arthur, who would have been so angry, so devastated to see me like this. "Our boy would never," he would have said, but he did. I cried until I was empty. Then, I laid down on the scratchy bedspread and stared at the water-stained ceiling. The world felt quiet and empty, and I was utterly alone. But I wasn't in the bottom of my suitcase, beneath the photo album and my spare sweaters, was a worn leather ledger. It was heavy. It was my secret, my burden, and my salvation. Arthur was a quiet man, a mechanic by trade. He had grease under his fingernails his whole life, but he had the mind of a banker. He didn't trust the stock market in the way people do now, with apps and fast trades. He was a slow and steady man. He'd read the financial pages every single day, making little notes in the margins. He'd buy small, overlooked stocks in companies that made things people would always need: salt, steel, thread. He'd buy government bonds. He never sold. "This isn't for us, Elara," he'd tell me, tapping the ledger with his calloused finger. "This is for a rainy day. This is for the boy, so he never has to worry like we did." When Arthur passed away from a sudden heart attack, the grief was a tidal wave. In the months that followed, I took his ledger to a financial advisor, a kind man, Mr. Henderson, just to understand what we had. I thought it might be a few $1,000s, a nice little cushion. Mr. Henderson had looked at the papers for a long time, his glasses perched on his nose. He kept typing things into his computer, his eyebrows climbing higher and higher. Finally, he took off his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Miller," he said, his voice full of awe, Your husband was a genius, a quiet genius. Over 40 years, with dividends reinvested and steady growth. Do you have any idea what this is worth? I shook my head. After taxes, if you were to liquidate everything, you're looking at just over $2.5 million. The number didn't seem real. $2,500,000. It was the kind of money you read about in books, not the kind of money a mechanic's widow from Ohio had tucked away in stocks and bonds. My first thought was Leo. I had to tell him. He was struggling, just starting out in his career, saving for a house. This money could change everything for him. But then, Arthur's words echoed in my head. So he never has to worry. Arthur hadn't wanted to just give Leo money. He wanted to give him security. And I started to think, what would that kind of money do to a young man, to his ambition, to his character? Would he still work hard? Would he still value the simple things, or would it make him lazy, entitled? And what about the people it would attract? So I made a decision. I would keep it a secret. I would use a little of it to help him, secretly. The down payment for his house, it came from an inheritance from a distant aunt I invented. The new car when his old one died. A lottery scratch-off win I told him about, laughing at my luck. He believed me. Why wouldn't he? I was his mom, who lived simply, who reused tea bags and patched her own clothes. I was just mom. Living with him and Chloe. I saw how they were with money. Always the newest phone, the most expensive brands, the fancy dinners they couldn't quite afford. They were swimming in debt, a fact they tried to hide from me. But a mother knows. I'd try to offer gentle advice. Maybe pack a lunch instead of buying it. Or do you really need another new jacket? They saw it as criticism. As an old woman who didn't understand the modern world, they didn't see it as love. They saw me as a burden. My simple, frugal ways were an embarrassment to their shiny, new, mortgaged, to-the-hilt life. Lying in that motel bed, the neon light buzzing. I finally understood. My secret hadn't protected Leo. It had blinded him. He never saw me. He only saw a dependent old woman who didn't have a penny to her name, a woman he had to take care of, and he had grown tired of the job. The next morning, I woke up with a stiff back and a clear head. The grief was still there, a heavy stone in my chest, but something else was there too, a flicker of something I hadn't felt in years, anger and resolve. I didn't call Leo. I didn't beg. I took the bus to a small diner and ordered pancakes. I ate slowly, deliberately. Then I walked to the bank and opened a new account. I called, Mr. Henderson. It's time, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice steady. It's a very rainy day. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. I was no longer a sad old woman in a motel. I was a woman with a purpose. I found a small apartment in a quiet building for seniors. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean and bright, with a big window that looked out over a park. I hired movers to get my few things from Leo's garage, my old armchair, my sewing machine, my books, my box of Arthur's things. I left a note for Leo, telling him I'd found a place and was okay. I didn't leave a new address. I started to build a life. Not Arthur's life, not Leo's life, but my life. I bought new sheets, soft ones. I bought a new teapot, a beautiful ceramic one that was a cheerful yellow. I filled my fridge with my favorite foods. I joined a book club at the local library. I started volunteering at the animal shelter, walking dogs who were as lonely as I had been. For the first time, the money wasn't a secret burden. It was freedom. It was the ability to say no to being treated poorly. It was the quiet dignity of paying my own way, of creating my own comfort. About 2 months after I left, my phone rang. It was Leo. His voice was strained. Mom, where are you? I've been worried. I'm fine, Leo, I said calmly. Look, Mom, things have been tough. Chloe got her hours cut at work. The car needs a major repair. I was just wondering, you know that lucky streak you have. Any chance you could help us out just a little bit? And there it was. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling because he missed me. He was calling because he needed money. The stone in my chest felt heavier than ever. I'm sorry to hear that, Leo, I said, and the words were true. I was sorry. I was sorry for the man he had become, but I can't help you. What? Why not? You always help. I took a deep breath. Your father left me some money, Leo. Quite a lot of money, actually. Silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him processing it. The confusion, then the dawning realization. What? What are you talking about? How much? His voice was sharp now, demanding. That's not important, I said softly. What's important is why I kept it a secret. I wanted you to build your own life, to learn the value of hard work. I wanted you to be a good man, like your father. I was afraid the money would change you. A bitter, hollow laugh came through the phone. Change me. You had millions of dollars and you watched us struggle. You lived in our house, eating our food, while you were sitting on a fortune. Do you have any idea how selfish that is? The cruelty of his words hit me, but they didn't break me. Not anymore. The money for your down payment came from me. Leo, the money for your car came from me. I helped you in the only way I knew how, a way that I thought would protect your character. But I see now I was wrong. It didn't protect you, it just made it easier for you to see me as worthless. I could hear Chloe in the background, her voice a sharp whisper. What is it? What money? I have to go, Leo, I said. The tears were coming now, but they were different tears. They were tears of mourning for a relationship that was truly over. Mom, wait, where are you? We need to talk about this, he pleaded, a new, desperate edge to his voice. But he didn't want to talk to me. He wanted to talk to my bank account. No, Leo, we don't, I said, and for the first time in my life, I hung up the phone on my son. I sat there, in my sunny, little apartment, my yellow teapot on the table, a book open on my lap. The pain was real. A mother's love doesn't just switch off. I will love my son until the day I die. But the illusion was gone. I had given him his space. Now, I was finally living in mine. He had kicked out his poor old mother. He had no idea he was really kicking out the only person who had ever truly tried to give him a life, not just an inheritance. And in doing so, he had lost both.